Chapter 8, Section 2 in the 7th grade note-taking guide is entitled Classifying Angles. So that's pretty much our limit of topics here today. We're just going to focus on different types of angles and the measures of different angles. So let's go ahead and start off with the definitions here that relate to the concept. What is an angle? An angle is a figure formed by two rays with a common endpoint. So we saw yesterday, remember, a ray has an arrowhead on just one side. So if you're putting two of those together, you have an angle. Vertex on an angle, that's the point where the two sides intersect. The point where two sides intersect. So that's where the two non-arrowhead sides come together. Right angle is an angle that measures exactly 90 degrees. What I want you to think of there is a T or an L shape. An L shape is probably best because that's one you could make with your hands pretty easily. If you make an L with your thumb and your pointer finger there, that's going to be a right angle. Now, as you pull your finger and your thumb together in that L shape, pull them together, that's going to be an acute angle. That's an angle that measures greater than 0, but less than 90 degrees. So again, if you're making that L shape with your thumb and your pointer finger, just start to pull them together. That's going to be an acute angle. An obtuse angle, that's an angle that measures greater than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. So take that L shape you're making with your thumb and your pointer finger, just stretch them out a little bit. You only have to go a little bit because anything bigger than 90 degrees is called an obtuse angle. A straight angle is an angle that measures exactly 180 degrees. Most of us would call this a line. That's all a straight angle is just a line. Has the two rays being put together is going to look like a line. Complementary angles, two angles whose measures have a sum of 90 degrees. So when we somehow put two angles together and they add up to make 90 degrees, they add together to make a right angle, those are called complementary angles. And supplementary angles, those are two angles whose measures have a sum of 180 degrees. Two angles whose measures have a sum of 180 degrees. So that's two angles that put together make a straight line. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the examples here. Number 1 is asking me to tell whether the angle is acute, right, obtuse, or straight. So remember, where we can start here every single time is with that L shape with our finger and our thumb, like this. When we pull the finger and the thumb closer together like this, that's an acute angle. When we stretch them out, that's going to be an obtuse angle. Well, if we take a look at what we have in A, if we take that L shape and stretch it out, that's exactly what we have. That's bigger than 90 degrees. 90 degrees, the way this is drawn, would be about like that. It's more than that. So that means it's an obtuse angle. As we take a look at B, on the other hand, B is when we're pulling our finger and our thumb closer together, because a right angle would be about like this, and obviously those two rays are closer to each other than that. So that's going to end up being an acute angle. The other two we didn't see there, we didn't see right, but we've talked about right in both examples. Again, that's making that classic L shape. And straight, remember, that's just going to look like a line to you. Two rays put together forming a line. That's a straight angle. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at example number 2 here. In number 2, they're asking me to use the diagram to tell whether the angles are complementary, supplementary, or neither. So remember, we have to remember what these terms mean here. Complementary refers to two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. Supplementary refers to two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. And neither is anything else. If it's not exactly 90 or not exactly 180, it's fitting into the other criterion there. Now, as far as this here, what we're looking at here is a protractor, and we have to read the measures of the protractor. What they're asking us to do here are to put together angle OMP, which starts at O, leads to M, and follows to P, so that's this angle in here. And then PMQ. I'm sorry, OMP is this one over here on the left side. PMQ starts at P, goes to M, and follows to Q. Here's O to M to P. Here's P to M to Q. So they want us to tell the measure of this put together. Well, if you can see, if you kind of take your pointer finger and your thumb, it kind of looks like that L shape, but we have to verify it by the actual measures here. So what we have here staring at OMP is OMP starts, it looks like, at the 15 degree mark and goes out to the 75 degree mark, and then continues out here to get out to Q to the 105 degree mark. Well, if we start at 15 and we go all the way to 105, 105 minus 15 adds up to, or subtracts to make, 90. And since they subtract to make 90, that means those two must add up to make 90 degrees, as they're showing you here. OMP shows out to be 60, PMQ shows out to be 30. When we put 60 and 30 together, we make 90, and 90 degrees is the definition of complementary. All right, in number 3, they're using those definitions. They're telling us that A and B are complementary, and the measure of angle A is 56 degrees, and they want to know what the measure of angle B is. So remember, complementary, as we saw just a moment ago above, implies that you have two angles that add up to make 90 degrees. So they're saying that these two angles add up to make 90 degrees, but then what they're telling us over here is the first one is 56 degrees. So all we're doing is figuring out how much more I would need to make this add up to 90 degrees. Now, as you can see, they've written this in equation form. They're saying 56 plus the measure of angle B is 90 degrees. Well, if you want, you can make this say X if it makes you feel better. But all it is an equation to solve. So even though we're in the geometry section, here they are solving an equation again. Well, you know, keep the variables on the left, numbers to the right. So X is good, 90 is good, 56 is not. 56 needs to go to the opposite side of the equal sign, so we're going to do the opposite. I'm going to knock 56 off both sides, and when I do that, I end up with 34. So angle B has to be 34 degrees, because 56 and 34 adds up to make 90 degrees. Finally, in the concluding example here, they're asking us to tell whether the angle is acute, right, obtuse, or straight. So let's review one more time. Right is when you make the L shape with your hands. Acute is when you pull your finger and your thumb together. Obtuse is when you take your thumb and your pointer finger and stretch them out even further. And straight is when you have two rays that go together to form what looks like a line. Well, that's exactly what we have here, where this does look like a line. So that must be a straight angle, an angle whose measure is 180 degrees.